Back in the shop again. More work on our retro chair with modern flair. This time in the lab, we are going to do a little bit of wet sanding. I already did a sand out on the primer coat from the other day, and that's looking pretty good. That area there is down to 400 grit, so the rest of it I was just kind of running over it with some 800 grit just to kind of get an eyeball of what it's looking like. So yeah, we got our water, we got our sandpaper, we got some sanding blocks, and we're just gonna do a little Thursday afternoon session. Let's just put it like that. So hope you guys are all having a wonderful afternoon. If sorry, playing with the gimbal, getting the controls dialed in here for you. Uh, okay, where do we want to start? I got some 1000 grit. That's where we're gonna start. And I've got a couple different sanding blocks. We'll kill the heater in the shop here quick. So I've got a couple different sanding blocks. These are a little bit more flexible than like a standard hard sanding block, something with a metal edge on it or plastic. And again, the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to try to catch the curves as best we can. Some of these flat areas I'll use a little bit more of a rigid, semi-rigid sanding block. But for the most part, these soft sanders are going to be fantastic for doing our 1000 and our 1500 and our 2000 cuts. So I'm literally just going to start by pouring some water on the chair. We're going to use it all up. I got some in a cup as well, but for what we're doing, water on the chair is going to be beautiful. So I can pretty much just kind of start in our puddle there and just kind of start working the paper back and forth. The main cut that I put on it was with 120 grit, 180 grit, and I came back and knocked that down with 400. So we've already got our shape pretty dialed in. We got a pretty nice puddle going on here. So at this point, we're not sanding for the shape. We're more sanding for getting all the surface scratches out, if that makes sense. We're just going to kind of give it a once over using our puddle. Eventually, we are going to want to change out the water once we get into a little bit higher grit. Kind of the trick of the trade with the auto body guys is that you change water every grit you use. So once you go through your 1000 grit, you'll switch over to your 1500, change your water out. That's just so you get a really, really nice mirror smooth shine. With this project, since we're going to be taking a mold of this, I don't need to go all the way out to 3000 or 5000, you know. Once we get our mold made and we start running parts, we are going to be doing a sand out afterwards. So it's not crucial that we actually get our chair down to, 3000 like an automotive show car shine. I'm going to move this forward just a little bit. There we go. How's that work for you? That better? So yeah, it's not crucial that we necessarily get down to like 2500, 3500, 4000 kind of thing. But I do want to get down into that 1000, 1500, 2000 range before we put a final polish on it. And like I said, once we start running parts off of our molded surface, we are going to do a final sand out and a final clear coat on these before they end up going to product or going to ship. So at the end of the day, we're just kind of doing this to make a nice mold so the parts pop out easy. That final sand out on the part before the clear coat and then the final polish once we're manufacturing, it's kind of overkill for making a part this nice or for making a mold this nice. On some of the race car parts I make, I do a mirror polish shine because we're trying to ship directly after the mold surface. So we'll do our first mold run, and then we basically go trim it and ship it. And if the customer wants to take it any further, they can take it further, but a lot of the times they don't. They're getting vinyl wrap because they're race car parts, and if they are show grade parts, then they've already got a body shop that they're working with, and they already know the deal. So again, because I already put a little bit of a cut on it, this is sanding very, very, very easy. And you just kind of want to run over the shape. Eventually we'll do a quick wipeout on this, just to kind of see where we're looking at, but I already know this is going to be butter smooth for what we're doing on it. You just want to take your time and kind of go over a little bit of everything. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to answer. Obviously, this is kind of a boot camp stage of the game. You know, the sanding stage necessarily isn't super technical. It's just a matter of somebody's got to do it. So if you have any ideas for colors, graphics, patterns, anything like that, feel free to shout out, because once we start making these, they're going to be custom, 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 custom. I've talked about it a little bit. We're going to be doing some of these in a carbon fiber, and we'll probably end up doing a forged carbon fiber. The shape is not super great in terms of getting fabric to go around it. It's going to be a really, really, really tricky shape to do in carbon fiber totally. Oh, something fell. It's all good. It's all good. But I think if we do these in a forged carbon or a shatter carbon, maybe with a little bit of metal flake or sparkle, I think it's going to look fantastic. These soft sanders are really the ticket for doing these complex curvy shapes. You do not want to sand with just your fingers. You'll put lines all over the place, but for what we're doing, this is working. This is working great. You can see we're obviously swimming here. No lifeguard on duty. And we want to try to get around every single nook and cranny, every single square inch we can get around here, because our main shape was already sanded out again. We're just kind of giving it a once over right now, not using very hard pressure, just light touch. Let the sanding block and the sandpaper do the work. There may be a couple little pinholes it looks like here we're gonna have to fill before the mold surface. Not a big deal. Worst case scenario, we can sand a couple little issues out of the mold surface if we need to, but we try not to do that if we don't have to, you know what I mean? This is kind of getting to be a fun project. I've got a number of friends who are eagerly waiting to see what the mold looks like, and they are already placing orders for custom colors and sports teams and stuff like that. So I'm sure we will do some in random liveries, whether that's a race car thing like a TRD look, whether that's a sports team like the Packers or the Vikings or the 49ers or something. Sky is the limit. So if you got a custom color in mind or a fancy logo, let me know, and I'm sure I'll be able to accommodate you. One thing with the water paper, it always grabs a little bit. It's kind of how you can tell when it's getting a little bit dulled out. Just a little bit of surface tension going on there. Gets a little grabby. That's very, very normal though. Like I said, very, very light pressure. It's not like we're sanding for the shape anymore. We're just sanding scratches out. So this goes pretty quick. And it's all relative. I mean, some of you guys hate sanding. I personally love sanding. I think that sanding is therapeutic. just you and the block and the object that you're working on. I don't know how far we're going to go here. I'll probably take it down to 1500, 2000 grit. Maybe I'll show you guys what the polish process looks like here a little bit too. I know my last live ended up going, holy cow, my last live ended up going like an hour and a half of just straight sanding. And if anybody's watching, if you make it through my last live on the sanding process of the chair, I did put a little Easter egg in there in the back. So there is a little contest going on with prizes involved. If you can find it, let me know. But yeah, this is the boot camp stage of it. Somebody's got to polish the plexiglass, right? And that line comes from an old friend of mine, Dave Fishman Rivera. You guys are old car stereo installers. That's what I used to do back in the day. Went to a lot of world finals competitions and Iasca and USAC and all over the place, from South Padre, Texas, and Oklahoma, and Kansas City, and all over the country. I used to do car stereo judging, but a friend of mine down out of Florida, Dave Rivera, he was kind of the pioneer in custom fiberglass sculpting and plexiglass work back in the day. And his trademark was to put a fish tank in all of his installs. So you could tell a Fishman install because he had a fish tank in his competition vehicles. And it was really, really cool. So he would get just filthy dirty polishing plexiglass. He's like, nobody likes to polish plexiglass, but somebody's got to do it. And he's like, and I would rather be the guy. And I took that to heart. Somebody's got to polish the plexiglass. Might as well be me. Somebody's got to sand the chair. Might as well be me. Again, we are just making a mess with our water puddle here, and that's totally okay. I'll do a quick wipe down once this water's almost gone. I think we're getting pretty close for the 1000 grit. Some of the polishing compound is going to take care of some of the errors that we make if we're missing anything, but this is looking pretty darn good already. And I'm not super concerned about missing a lot of it. I think that as we go through the grits, we will take care of any of the little issues that we missed, if we missed any, but I don't think that's likely. This is sanding out really, really, really nice, so. Let me grab a microfiber here, give us a quick wipe down. What the heck? What the heck is right? Modern chair, retro flare. Retro chair, modern flare. That's what we're going by. So do a quick little wipe down here. You can see the shine coming through. And this will be a really good time to start looking at the chair once it's got a little bit of that reflectiveness on it from the being wet. Obviously, when you're doing dry sanding, you don't get that reflection that you get when it's wet or when it's polished. We can even go that far and say when it's polished. So when we're wiping this down, I'm really looking closely. It's going to be difficult to show you guys on the camera, but I'm really looking closely at the reflections from the lights in the shop. I want to make sure that they're nice and straight. I want to make sure there's no waves or flutters or anything like that, because that's what we're going to see once we end up getting a final clear coat on this, if that makes sense. Let's see if I can show you guys a little bit more what I'm talking about here. Carly Mae, how you doing? Happy Thursday. Working on a retro chair with modern flare project. You can see I'm talking about these light reflections like right through here. They're nice and smooth. They aren't wavy or anything like that. So that's kind of what we're after when we're looking at the chair project. And I am going to rotate this around just to kind of catch different light angles here. This is looking really good though, really good. Like I said, I know it's very difficult to describe what I'm talking about, but you can kind of see, again, these reflections. There's going to be a little bit of shape distortion, but in terms of how smooth they are, that's really what we're looking for, is just a nice smooth surface finish. So when we start making this mold process, it's going to go good. And we're kind of drying out a little bit there. Once I put a polish on this, it will stay nice and shiny, but until then, this is kind of what we're left with, is going over it a few times with the rag and just making sure it's nice and wet, make sure the lines look good, which so far they do look really, really good. I can't wait to actually start the molding process. I know the sanding process of this is fairly boring for you guys when I do it live. But like I said at the beginning, I want to go through each and every step at least a little bit live and show you guys what the boot camp of it is. You know, real world, real shop, real life kind of situation here, because it doesn't just happen overnight. You know, this takes multiple sessions, hours of time, and that's before we're even ready for for the mold. Once I make the mold, we're probably going to have, all of 15 hours into making the mold of this. By the time I make the flanges around the outside, do our waxing, buffing, surface text, the surface compound, stuff like that. And then once I start doing the gel coat and the fiberglass process, it's a pretty good process. It's a pretty good process. And then obviously, once we make a mold of it, we're going to be making parts. And so that's another step of the process. So this little how-to online, doing it live and showing you the real world of it, I hope helps out some of you guys. I hope. I'm trying. I'm trying to show you guys some tricks, right? So staying on my live is one of the tricks of the trade, I guess. As I do these things and as I come up with scenarios of fabrication techniques or product information, anything like that. Sorry, I'm trying to move this camera around. Once I come up with where we're at, I'll tell you guys what products I'm using, how I'm doing it, and application results, all that kind of fun jazz. There we go. This is looking pretty good so far. I've got a couple scratches here and there. I'm going to work out a little bit more. Like I said, this isn't super, super critical that we get them all out at this stage, because again, we are going to keep doing more and more and more sanding, but I can see that there's a couple little surface scratches here and there. No big deal. Just kind of tune them up a little bit as we see them. Kind of get all Bob Ross on it, right? So it's an art project at the end of the day. We could make the mold right now off the chair. When I do production mold work for clients, sometimes the client does not want to pay extra money just for polishing the mold. If we're only going to be running, let's just say, a dozen parts. Obviously, everybody's concerned about profit margins, right? So when you're sanding, that's just labor counted on the project. And if you're only going to run a dozen parts and you have 6 hours of sanding, that means each one of those parts that you sell, you're going to have to recoup that money from your mold process. Some guys figure that in, some guys don't. And it's very, very, very difficult on low production stuff to keep high margins. So if we can cheat a little bit on the mold process sometimes, it's not all the times, but if there are times when we can cheat and, stop at, let's say, 800 grit, if that's going to be acceptable for the part, we'll stop at 800 grit, we'll stop at 1,000 grit and just run them. And especially if the parts are getting post-finished where they're going to get sanded and they're going to get automotive cleared after the fact, you're never going to see these sand scratches in the mold anyway. So is it cheating? Maybe, maybe not, but it all depends on the project. By all means, if you're going to run 100 parts off a 100 parts off a mold, you better make sure that mold is pretty nice. But if you're going to run 1 or 3 or 4 or 5, you can kind of get away with a lot of fabrication shortcomings, if I don't know what the word for it is, but you can shortchange your fabrication a little bit. We're not trying to do that on this too bad, but I am going to be final sanding each one of these parts when they come out of the mold. I am going to be putting clear coat on them after the fact, so when I do that, I'm going to sand this to 600 grit once we pop them out of the mold. So once I actually get the mold surface, we'll lay our custom parts in, we'll pop the part out, and then we'll have to sand that out with 600 grit regardless. So anything I do more than 600 grit on this is just kind of doing it to make the mold look pretty. And you will get a little better longevity with your mold if they don't have sand scratches in them. So that's another kind of trick of the trade. These soft sanding blocks come in crutch. These are not easy curves that you'd want to. You would not want to do this by hand. Let me tell you. I typically recommend anytime you're doing any sanding, do not do it by hand. Always use a sanding block if you can. If you want to switch to a longer style block, by all means. For some of the more flat areas, you can do that just to kind of help keep it nice and smooth. You can never have too many sanding blocks. That's what I like to say. If you're in a pinch and you need to make a sanding block, and I'll show you a little trick. Let me grab something here. So if you're in a pinch, this is just regular Owens Corning. I believe this is 1 inch thick. You can get this at any hardware store. If you are in a pinch and you need a soft sanding block, something just to help you out with, just take a razor blade, pop yourself off a little bit of this pink foam, and this will work as a sanding block. Obviously, it's going to be fairly rigid. It's not going to be curvy and flexible like some of our soft sanders here. Grab a different sheet here. But you can make your own sanding blocks, whether that's with plastic, whether that's with wood. But for doing flat stuff, you can totally get away with just a piece of pink styrofoam. And any block is better than no block, let me tell you. You know, something like that. Like I said, I'm not going to keep using that block. I've got other blocks to use, but if you're in a pinch, there you go. Tricks of the trade. The gray primer that I'm using today is a product from Dura Technologies. This is a gray surface primer mixed with a high gloss Sunshield clear coat. Um, I'll link the previous video. I think it was a short I did. I'll link a previous short that I did when I actually did the primer coating on this. I really like doing a blend of some of Duratec's products because you get the best of both worlds. You get a really good shine. You also get really, really easy sanding capability when you're using that Sunshield clear. I found that when you just use the primer surfacer by itself, it's a little dull. It doesn't quite polish out like I want it to polish out. So add that Sunshield clear in for a little extra high gloss. This pocket down here that I'm working on right now is probably the most difficult area of this because you got curves coming in from all the directions. And so to try to keep that nice and smooth, you really have to have a soft block. All right, let's see how we're looking now. We got to be getting pretty close. Got to be getting pretty close for the next stage. The higher up we go in grits, so right now we're working in 1,000 grit. Once I start getting a 1,500, 2,000 grit, 3,000 grit, if we want to take it out that far, the polish will actually start to come out on its own just with the higher grits. So right now we've got a little bit of a dull surface once the water dries here. And as we go up in higher grits, the 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, the surface gets just smoother and smoother and smoother. So you're going to have that natural shine come out just by going up higher in grits. You don't need to keep going through the processes. That's looking really, really, really good. I'm going to take a look at this just kind of. Just to kind of eyeball up our reflections, make sure everything is still smooth, make sure everything is still straight. Because the last thing that I want to try to do is fix parts that are coming out of a mold because we didn't sand enough at this stage. That is no fun. A good fabrication friend of mine, actually the founder of Express Composites here, Mr. Swanson, said, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you won't have time to fix it when it's wrong. Quote unquote, famous quote by Jim Swanson. So take your time, do it right the first time. You do not need to be in a rush. Because the last thing you want to do is fix something. Looking pretty good. I think I'm going to grab another microfiber here. Kind of dry this off just a hair. I could use air to dry this off. I typically don't want to do that when I'm doing live, just because the compressor is really loud and noisy, and you guys don't want to hear that. So anything we can do by hand, we'll do it by hand. It's looking pretty good. What do you guys think? Should I switch to 1,500? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. We might be there. Yeah, sure. Let's switch to 1,500 and see what it looks like. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pour out all the water from our 1,000 grit sand stage. And we're going to switch water because all that 1,000 grit, we don't want it to be in our 1,500 grit sand scratch, our 1,500 stage. Now, if we wanted to, we could be dry sanding this. That's kind of a trick of the trade in the auto body industry. If you're into show cars and getting things mirror smooth, is you can actually dry sand all your sanding stages. So 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 grit. Do I recommend that? Again, it depends on the project that you're working on. Sometimes you might need that. I would say that generally speaking, you probably don't. Unless you're building show cars, then you better do it, but here I'm just doing some dry sanding just to kind of see where we're sitting at. And the dry sanding, you can see these scratches underneath a little bit easier. So there is a positive to doing dry sanding, because we'll actually pick up a 1,000 grit sand scratch using 1,500 paper. You'll be able to see it a little bit easier. I think we're going to be in the ballpark. Even just doing it wet, I think we're close enough. This is a fairly smooth shape, so things are sanding out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it, at least. Again, this is a 1,500 sandpaper. I'm going to switch to some water here. Once we do a wipeout on a 1,500 grit, we can really see how we're sitting on those sand scratches. If it looks good, I might just go straight to polish, you know. Like I said, we are going to be sanding this out after we start making production pieces, so at the end of the day, 1,000 grit's okay, 1,500 grit's okay. You'll never see that once we start making the mold surface. Ah! Water down. Water down. That's all right. I've got plenty of surplus water here on tap. We are using Nature's Touch spring water today. There is no water that's better than the other water. Some people will tell you to use a distilled water if you want to just keep your primer free from potential contaminants. I don't know. I don't know if there's actually any rhyme or reason to that, but whatever. That's what some people say. Let me see if I can do a quick wipe down here, just to show you the difference. I don't even know if we're going to be able to see the difference between 1,000 and 1,500. Maybe. 1,000 and 2,000, you can see the difference. 1,500, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the difference. We'll see. Gonna shine. It's gonna shine right up. Let me grab that microfiber here. Boop. Dry microfiber here, get off that residue. I guess you kind of can see the difference here. Let me show you. So you can see this is the 1,000 grit sand line here. That's our 1,500 sand line right there. You can see the color difference going from the 1,000 grit and the 1,500 grit. So yeah, there is a slight difference. Interesting, huh? Fancy dancy. Whoop, trying to get the camera set back up on the stand here. There we go. Trying to keep you guys in frame here. I'm trying to keep in frame. Where'd my sanding block go? There we go. So if this looks pretty good after the 1,000 grit, I might not even go out to 2,000. I might just polish it at 1,500. That should be completely acceptable for this project and for this mold. One thing I kind of am known for is making really nice parts out of the gate. So when I do a lot of production parts, a lot of my clients don't do post-finishing. The parts look so good when they pop out of the molds where there's no pinholes, there's no, weird stuff in the mold surface. So they'll literally just take my parts after I trim them up and they'll just send them. Like I said, for race cars and stuff like that, it doesn't even matter. Most of those guys are putting vinyl wraps on the top of their stuff anyway, but we try to make the nicest parts we can make. Because if you can, you should. There are a lot of shops that struggle with making perfect parts out of the mold. And I don't know what to tell those guys. You guys will see once we start making parts here that I usually don't have the surface imperfections that you see a lot of these big shops have. I don't have to go back through and fill pinholes. I don't have to resand anything. Like I said, generally, when I make parts, they're pretty much ready to rock and roll fresh out of the mold. Unless you want them to be show grade, then you have to sand them and you have to do a second clear coat regardless, but rarely is that what's on the ticket, if you know what I mean. Every once in a while. What I've been getting into the habit of trying to do is tell people that they should put some candy coat or some graphics or color or something like that on their parts once they're done. And carbon fiber is never designed to be a cosmetic finish. Back in the day, what it was designed for was structural integrity. Very, very stiff fabric, fantastic performance qualities. No one ever thought that carbon fiber would be a cosmetic finish. And nowadays, everybody wants perfect carbon fiber. They want perfect weave, they want perfect resin infusions. And honestly, that's a tall order. I know that the industry has kind of set the bar pretty high, but like this shape, for example, when I do carbon fiber on here to try to lay this in one piece, there's going to be some amount of fabric distortion going through these armrest areas here. And depending on how I want to work that out, you're going to get a lot of weave distortion, which I don't think looks good. So when we do this for cosmetics out of carbon, it might have to have some seams in it, unfortunately, or we're just going to have to stick with like a forge or a shatter carbon just to not have a woven textile. Because there's one thing that I don't like, and that is carbon fiber that looks like crap. If the weave starts moving too much, you just can't have that part be made out of carbon, at least not for cosmetics. Sometimes there's such a thing as you can do an overlay on the part where you can run it in the initial carbon fiber layup, and then once your part is test fit, you can do an overlay for the cosmetic side of it. But then you're adding weight, and then that kind of defeats the purpose of the carbon. You know what I mean? So I don't know. We'll see. You guys are definitely going to be following along for the journey here. So once I get the mold made, once we start draping fabric, we'll see if carbon fiber is possible. If it is, great. If it's not, well, we'll just deal with that when we deal with it. We'll worry about that later. It'll all be okay until it's not. We're not going to worry about it until it goes south. Paper's starting to stick a little bit. Could reload on the paper. And this is just kind of, it's just kind of boot camp, you know? Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to go through and sand through all the stages and make sure it looks good. Like I said, why not me? I like sanding. Like I said, the more and more that we can go through the grits, the more and more that natural polish is going to start showing up just with the low abrasives. And typically that starts to happen right around that 2,500, 3,000 mark. But we can start to see a little bit of shine right now. We went to 1,500. Starting to shine up. Yeah, if I was to take a guess, I would still say we are probably 3 weeks out from actually making a mold of this still. 2 weeks maybe? I don't know. Depends on how the flanges go, I guess, and how the waxing stage goes, but a couple weeks. We're getting there in a couple weeks. Hopefully by New Year we can have some parts popping out. That's kind of been the goal. Is over the next month we'll finish up the mold flanges. We'll get the mold all dialed in, and then start making parts hopefully by 26 is kind of the goal. No, it's not kind of the goal. It is the goal. We're gonna be making parts by 26. We're not gonna put this off any further. Again, these soft sanding blocks are saving the day. I tell you what, this would be no fun doing this by hand. Spend the few bucks, invest in some sanding equipment, and as long as you don't wreck it, you know, it should last many, many years in your shop. So. Again, I can't say enough about this Duratec Primer Surfacer and Sunshield Clear Mix. It is sanding out beautifully. This product is ultimately designed for boat mold making, is what it was originally designed for. When boat manufacturers are going to make a mold of a brand new hull, they will typically coat their entire plug with this Duratec Primer Surfacer. And then once they have that all polished out and it's beautiful, then they'll make a mold. So obviously this is a little bit easier than sanding out a 40-foot boat, but it's all the same process, just on a little bit bigger scale. We're getting pretty close here. Pretty fun times, huh? I would have some music on, but I did a live once and I had the radio playing in the background, and I ended up getting hit with a copyright strike. You know, of course, obviously, right? Because the radio's playing in the background. And so I don't know if the best solution would just be to get some non-copyright, you know, some copyright royalty-free music and play that in the background, or if you guys want to hear install stories and car show stories and stuff like that, I've got a lot of them. One fun story I can tell is way back in the day, I'm going to go back to my car stereo days. We were competing down in Kansas City for the World Finals, and there was a guy from Mexico who had a Volkswagen Golf, I think. It was a hatchback, little hatchback, and he had a very, very, very cool plexiglass subwoofer box and very fancy subwoofer. So his subwoofer was all detailed out and chromed and fancy magnet structures. And the box that he had was actually a round circle plexiglass box. So it was actually really, really thick wall acrylic. And so I was talking to him and I was like, how did you do this? Like, this is really, really thick wall. And I thought they'd cast it, where they literally made a mold and then poured plexiglass into there. No, that's not how they did it. They actually made a template and they heated up 1-inch thick acrylic and bent it around that buck. And they said they did it 10 times before it actually turned out right. So I have no idea what the cost on that box was, but 1-inch plexiglass is not cheap. And so if you screw up once or twice, okay, but if you have to do it 10 times, I was like, holy cow. And it looked beautiful. Let me tell you, it was gorgeous. That same Shelly met a guy who also had spherical subwoofer boxes where the subwoofer boxes were round. And I asked them how they did that, and they said that they literally went to like Walmart or the toy store and they bought beach balls, is what they bought, like the silicone inflatable beach balls. And so they literally laid fiberglass over the beach ball, and then that's how they got their nice round shape. And then obviously a lot of sanding. So they literally just sanded and sanded and sanded and sanded to make it smooth. And it was really cool. I'd never seen round subwoofer boxes before, so that was the first time I saw that trick. Back in the day, there was a lot of really, really talented and very creative installers. I would love to know where half of those guys are. They're probably making epoxy tables or something like that now. I have no idea, but these guys were very, very creative-minded guys back in the car stereo days. And I'll kind of throw myself in that loop. We did a lot of cool stuff on our installs. We did a lot of etched plexiglass, custom neons, custom dashboards, reworking door panels. I mean, there was no limit when we were doing high-end stereo systems. We were very, very fortunate enough to have some clients who gave us the ability to do the best we could, if you know what I mean. And it was an honor to do those kind of systems. All right, I'm gonna switch rags here. Take a look at how this 1500 is going. So in theory, we should have a lot less little minor scratches in the 1500 than we did our first 1000 grit coat. And that'll just get kind of better and better and better as we go, you know. It's looking pretty glossy right now. Let me grab the other one. And I'm still paying attention to all these reflections all over the place that I see, just to make sure that we're staying nice and smooth, that nothing's starting to wobble or distort. It's really, really difficult to do on a shape like this. I might go grab a polisher quick just to kind of see where we're sitting at, see how this might polish up at 1500 grit. Still a few little sand scratches here and there. We'll want to work those out. Let me grab some polishing compound here. Let's see what we got. Let's see where we're getting to. Let's see, do we want to use the super abrasive stuff or do we want to use the not super abrasive stuff? I've got a few different types of polishing compounds. This is just a pneumatic air sander. This is Meguiar's one-step compound. Sometimes I will use the 3M Perfected compound. This is a little bit more aggressive here. Give it a good shake. So if we do have any minor sand scratches, this is going to do a slightly better job of, we're going to get it all over the place here. There we go. This is going to do a slightly better job of working out some of those work out some of those minor surface scratches. Let me grab our airline real quick. All the way down, all the way down. Okay. Gonna zoom in up pretty close here. Okay, so we've got our polisher. We've got our polish on the part. And I'm just gonna start by dab, 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 dab. Grab our rag here. Do a clip with a wipe. This is looking fantastic. This is gonna make a really, really, really nice mold. Take a look at that, huh? Woo-wee! Bling, bling. That's exactly what we're hoping for. Oh yeah, that's looking beautiful. So if the whole chair can look like that, I think we are in business for making the mold. Don't you guys? Near smooth is what they say. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I'm going to hop off live here, play around with this a little bit more off camera, and then get ready to rock and roll for the next stage. So, thanks for saying hi today. I will catch you guys all later in the next episode of Retro Chair Modern Flair. We're getting one step closer to making the mold. See you guys all later.